Want to save a truckload? Get a Peterbilt 579 from Brandt with payments as low as $3,500 a month. Get the same low rates for your choice of contract length, 3, 4, or 5 years, and you can buy or walk when the contract ends. It's the only payment plan that puts you in the driver's seat. You could say it's a big rig deal. Drive to your Brandt Peterbilt dealer to save a truckload while quantities last.
Blog Talk Radio.
My opinion, but you have a new book that you really want the word to get out about, and it's called "Science Was Wrong." If we can get into that immediately, and
sure.
Just start speaking about that. What was the inspiration behind that book? There's some really heavy.
It was a realization as Kathleen Martin and I worked on the book Captured about the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. She is Betty's niece.
Yes.
And as I worked on my book after that, Flying Saucers and Science, how many times progress in so many fields was stymied because of smart people saying stupid things.
Yes.
Saying it was impossible. The original title for the book, incidentally, was "It's Impossible, Isn't It?" But the publisher has the right to change the title. So, but there are 14 chapters. We each did 7. We live quite a long distance apart from each other, so easy to do your own chapter and trade them and review and so forth. But we cover a broad range of subjects, of examples of smart people saying stupid things. And the point of the book really is that there are consequences. It's nice to laugh and say, oh, wasn't he wrong? But when medical people say stupid things and stand in the way of progress, people die, thousands of them. We give several of those stories in the book.
Right.
When others, especially for some reason or other, astronomers seem to be on top of my guilty of stupidity thing. They've stood in the way of flight in airplanes. They've stood in the way of space flight. They really have stuck their nose in and made false claims about so many. Young people may not realize it, but if you go back, say, 100 years or so, you'll find that their picture of what the solar system, the universe, the galaxy was like, was totally wrong. We know Mars never had any water. It's dry forever. There couldn't have been life there. And Venus is a tropical paradise. I suppose if you like 600 degrees sulfuric acid atmosphere, you could call it that. And so there's a price to be paid for paying attention to people who are experts in one area, speaking out in another area where they are not experts, but presume that if what is claimed to be true was, they would know about it, and they don't, so it must not be, and let's not waste our time with this nonsense kind of thing. And so it was necessary to really dig into some of these topics, partly because we know we're going to be attacked for some of the subjects, our stand on them, if you will. But you got to go where the data leads you. And, you might say I'm no stranger to controversy. I've given over 700 lectures, usually entitled Flying Saucers Are Real. That's going to invite a little controversy right off the bat. So if you don't have facts in hand, you shouldn't put mouth in gear, is my view.
Why do you think that there is this continuous, almost cannibal type mentality within the science community? Is it to suppress information?
Well, it's arrogance coupled with ego, I think.
Right.
And especially in the academic world. I worked in industry, which means that I'm nobody on an academic score. I only have a master's degree, and I worked for General Electric and Westinghouse and General Motors. But what university were you doing your research at? There's a strange notion, and 2 people have come at me about this recently, that if research is to be done, of course it's going to be done in academia. I had one guy tell me, knowing that I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident, That, look, if Roswell had happened, there'd have been a whole slew of scientists that would have to leave their positions in academia to work on that. And I was aghast when he said, that's total nonsense. Apparently he wasn't aware that during World War II, the United States built these huge, very competent laboratories and groups of people, mostly for the Manhattan Project to develop nuclear weapons, but and there were all kinds of labs. The criteria you'd have to have, darn flying saucer crashes. You got wreckage out in the middle of nowhere. Now what do? Well, you got to make sure that the pieces, and we're talking lots of pieces, are seen by people who are A, very competent, B, have an existing high-level security clearance, C, have access to a place where they can store classified materials and can get whatever support they need. You can't say, well, we'll wait until these guys get a clearance, then we'll hand them this stuff and see what they say. Right. And those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach Jim, I guess. I don't know.
Pecking order.
But, you know, let me just mention, to give an example, so people may say, what's he talking about? Well, there were 3 nuclear weapon labs established. Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, Sandia Labs in Albuquerque, and Lawrence Livermore Lab up in California. Now, when I checked about 5 years ago, each of these employed more than 8,000 people. Each of them had an annual budget over $1 billion, and the cumulative for the 3, and that's not all the labs we have, but these 3, you know, guaranteed people had to have clearances, had the best equipment, and they had to have talent. The total budget for the 3, more than $3 billion annually, was more than the total budget for the National Science Foundation in all its areas of interest and research. Wow. So, no, you didn't need an exodus from academia. Not at all. I'll give you another example. When I was working on nuclear airplanes way back in 1958, we spent that year $100 million. We employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. Now, in 1958, $100 million was a lot of money. And people say, well, it's not so much now. Sure, but it was back then. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't the biggest program around. But if you want something built with technology, you go to Lockheed, you go to General Electric, I work for GE, you go to Westinghouse, you go to Boeing, places like that, where they have high security, high competence, ready and raring to go, and none of this publish or perish kind of nonsense. You work on classified stuff, you don't publish, except in classified reports. That's the way it is. Sorry. You know, so it's a misconception, a major misconception, and the arrogance is still there from the people who are outside in the academic world.
Right.
That's not the real world.
Is that why you have, for those that don't know, an issue with Bob Lazar? A, his credentials have never been verified, and B, the way he came about and gave this information?
Well, naturally, no. I would have been happy if he checked out, because he wasn't in academia. But the fact that he claimed to have a master's in physics from MIT and a master's in electronics from Caltech, and to have been a physicist working for Los Alamos National Lab. Now, these are all, high-class institutions. But when I started checking, I found that, he had a friend of his, a guy named Huff, call me. What would it take for me to believe in Bob Lazar? And I said, well, scientists have diplomas. Mm-hmm. They belong to professional groups. They publish papers. They have resumes. Those would be a long start, And, of course, I never got anything from him, but I sent him copies of my diplomas, a bachelor's and master's in physics from the University of Chicago. I contacted 5 different people at MIT. They never heard of him, and I talked to the legal counsel. The excuse is, well, the government cleared his records. The legal counsel said it's impossible to do that at MIT. They have loads of people who do classified work after they get out. them while they're still there. I checked with Los Alamos. Yes, he's in their phone book. And right after his name, it says K/M, Kirk Meyer. He didn't work for the lab. He worked for a subcontractor. I talked to his high school. That was a strange conversation. He graduated in August, not with his class. He finished in the bottom third of his high school class, and he had one science course there. Now, to get into MIT, you got to be in the top 20%. You certainly have to have more than a chemistry course. I know. I was accepted at MIT a very long time ago, but I checked with the admissions office, and he claimed he was asked to name some of his professors because I had raised the objection, hey, I'm older than he is, and I can tell you the names of my professors at the University of Chicago. And he said, well, let's see now, William Duxler, he'll remember me from Caltech Physics. Well, I called and located the only William Duxler who's a physicist. He never taught at Caltech, but he did teach at Pierce Junior College in the San Fernando Valley in California. And anybody who can go to MIT doesn't go to Pierce in the first place, but he was going there at the very same time. And Duxler told me, he checked. He was mad because his name was being used. And Bob had taken one of his courses at Pierce.
Right.
And at the very same time when he was supposedly at MIT, 2,500 miles away. Now, that's pretty neat because you can go to MIT, you don't go to Pierce Junior College.
Right.
He also made a claim that at one time Los Alamos had 500 pounds of element 115. He had stolen some of it, they stole it back. Well, it sounds good, except it's got such a short half-life, there's no way anybody can stockpile 500 pounds of this stuff. So it was things like this that didn't check out. When I called Los Alamos, I gave them the names of two people. One, a colleague of mine who I knew worked there. We both worked on radiation shielding for nuclear rockets. They found my guy, and I knew he had a top-secret clearance. They couldn't find Bob. So, give me some evidence. That's what I'm looking for is evidence. I will withhold judgment, but I'm kind of finicky. When people make claims to me, I check them out. And I had...
And do you think that the whole kind of overblowing of his status and credentials was because of, during that time especially, there was a big interest in Area 51 from, researchers and civilians, and this was sort of thrown in the way to kind of dilute it?
He was the ultimate, insider, so to speak.
Or Patsy.
It was mostly because of John Lear, whose father was Learjet and so forth, but John himself is a pilot who's flown umpteen different airplanes. I've met him. I've been in his home. But John believes what he believes in. He doesn't check for evidence. You don't need evidence. Just believe what you want to believe. And I'm sorry, as a physicist, I can't work that way because I have found that often people don't tell the truth. I mean, that sounds like a terrible thing. So I called the Air Force Academy about somebody who claimed to have gone there. He hadn't. I was right to be suspicious. And I asked the woman, the registrar's office, I said, do you get a lot of calls about people who claim to have gone there and didn't? She says, oh, yes, all the time. We're a prestigious place. She said the saddest story was a woman who called and said her fiancé had lost his diploma, and she wondered if she could get a replacement. Well, sure, what's his name and so forth. He had never gone there. I don't know what the rest of that story was. So it pays to be careful.
Right.
In a world in which many people think they can get... There's a guy who was almost a football coach at Notre Dame who had, let's say, imagined a degree he didn't have.
Yes. Well, let's cross it over, because there's quite a few people, as you mentioned. I don't know if you want to give specific names, but it seems that the UFO question and the alien debate is really picking up steam. And some notable persons of interest are kind of putting their name along with it all of a sudden. And there's almost a scientific flip-flop. Does that get you heated under the collar? Because for decades they were kind of stepping away from it, and now all of a sudden they're putting their nose in there?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question, because my paper at the Mutual UFO Network Symposium, the 41st, was held in July. I spoke on July 24th in Denver. And my paper was Stephen Hawking, SETI, and Science.
Yes.
And I called the first part of 2010 the alien year in the media, because there were a lot of pretty decent comments, respectful, if you will, because statements were being made by big shots. Stephen Hawking, as an example, Seth Shostak, Dr. Seth Shostak, several other names, Dr. Paul Davies. And the press treated these guys with respect. There was a big conference at the British Royal Institute. And they had Frank Drake and other people like that speaking. And so they talked respectfully of aliens, not of UFOs, you understand. But there was an underlying assumption that there are aliens out there. Well, that's a good first step. Unfortunately, much of what was said was kind of silly. It's one of the reasons I call SETI the silly effort to investigate, SETI. Let me give you an example. Why in the world did Stephen Hawking say that we shouldn't make our presence known to the aliens, as if we haven't already? Because remember that the natives were visited by Columbus, and it didn't do them any good, And what a silly thing to say. Mm-hmm. We're not like the natives. We've got weapons of mass destruction, lots of them. We've exploded 2,000 nuclear weapons. We have intercontinental ballistic missiles. We have huge networks of reconnaissance systems, airborne radar, space radar, ground radar. We're ready to go to the stars. We've figured out how the stars produce their energy. Mm-hmm. That's an incredible step forward and would be of concern to anybody in the neighborhood. But they don't like to talk about neighborhoods. Stephen talked about, it's unlikely that there's anybody within 100 light years. Where does that come from? He doesn't give any data. Within 55 light years, there's 2,000 stars, so about 8 within 100 light years. And the notion, a couple of them expressed, well, if they had been coming here, they'd have communicated first. Why would anybody say that? Did Columbus send smoke signals to the natives saying, hey, guys, I need dinner for 42? It makes no sense. And the SETI people don't allow for interstellar travel. They don't allow for colonization or migration. And they really don't expect that there are many civilizations out there. Frank Drake, and he's even older than I am, which is saying something. Frank says that, there may be as many as 10,000 civilizations in our galaxy, planets on which there are beings who could send radio signals to us. Now, why they would do that, he doesn't say, but 10,000 sounds like a big number. But in our galaxy, there are over 100 billion stars. Mm-hmm. So that would mean only 1 in every 10 million stars has a planet able to send signals. That's darn few. There are more than 50 stars within 55 light years that are sun-like stars and probably have planets. And, colonization and migration are how we got here. Most of us, where we are now, I've checked audiences sometime. How many of you had your ancestors 10 generations back living here? Well, practically nobody. Native Americans maybe, but that's pretty rare. So it's one of those strange things. Now, we do need to recognize that, let's face it, if aliens are coming here, who needs SETI? Learn sign language, Mm-hmm. There go their jobs. That's a great job. We're going to wait and listen, and I'll pass the job on to my child and grandchild, but we're going to make the greatest discovery ever. You ask them about UFOs, and they'll say, there's no evidence. Well, Seth Shostak was in the room on the Queen Elizabeth II when I gave a lecture, Flying Saucers Are Real, 5 years ago. We each attended 3 lectures by the other. And I talk about 5 large-scale scientific studies of flying saucers. Right. And after each one, I describe what's in it, show a picture of the cover, etc. I say, how many people here read this? He hadn't read any of them.
Well,
So how does he have the gall to say there is no evidence? Meaning I haven't looked at any evidence. Now, he did admit on a coast-to-coast radio show that he has my book on his nightstand. He didn't say he'd read it. But we did a debate on Coast to Coast, incidentally, and we went at it for 3 hours. We were friendly, if you will. It wasn't nasty. But I got 57%
that's
of the vote.
I have. Off the record, are these people, willing to budge, or are they so firm in their stance, their scientific stance, that
it's not a scientific stance. It's a personal stance having nothing to do with science.
But in their minds, they claim it's their scientific stance. They're so and
they are not willing to budge. They'll say there's life out there, but they ain't coming here.
Yeah.
And that's one of those strange attitudes that can only be explained by enlightened self-interest. They admit they're coming here. They would have to look at the UFO data, and they don't want to do that.
That's right.
And remember that one of the keystones here is they're assuming that there are civilizations out there using signal-sending techniques compatible with our capability.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how would they know what they were in the first place? And in the second place, how advanced can we be? We've only had radio for, 120 years, something like that. The planet's 4.5 billion years old, so they're a little bit ahead of us. 1,000 years? They're going to use techniques we're not using. I don't use a slide rule anymore, and I did when I started working in industry. Mm-hmm. I said that to 2 classes of students a few years ago in Michigan, and nobody in either of those classes knew what a slide rule was. And that's less than 50 years. Mm-hmm. So it tells you technology changes. If your grandfather had this computer that's sitting in front of me now, 50 years ago, what would it have been worth? It would have been incredibly valuable because it can do things that he didn't have anything you could do. This makes the computers of then nothing.
Watch.
Toys,
is there any, I'm not sure if this has any connection to anything, but, this communication from other civilizations and crop circles becoming more complex, could that be a side effect of that communication device, or is that
I doubt it very much. I would certainly expect that if there is a connection, it's from guys coming here doing things.
Right.
Not from guys out there. That one, crop circles are in my gray basket, maybe. Now, what isn't in my gray basket are the physical trace cases. Yes. A man named Ted Phillips for 40 years has been collecting such cases. He's got several thousand from more than 70 countries where people see a craft on or near the ground, and after it leaves, one finds physical changes, the equivalent of burn circles, burn gears, landing gear marks, not the pretty crop circles. And in 1/6 of those cases, there are witnesses to beings associated with the craft. Now, these aren't huge motherships. These are small, under 100 feet in diameter, Earth excursion modules, I like to call them.
Yeah.
But we should be aware that there are some huge motherships, let's say 1/2 mile to 1 mile long. That's pretty good size.
Yes. And there's a lot of speculation of another subject, and I wonder if you have any updates, especially from the inside source of the Aurora Project or any of those specific type of air vehicles.
The which project?
Aurora Project.
Oh, people have postulated that there is an Aurora Project. There have been witnesses to this what seems to be a pulsed, very rapid donut on a rope kind of, they describe the exhaust. It wouldn't surprise me if those exist. I mean, after all, we put aside the SR-71. Now, you don't get rid of your fastest vehicle, your big reconnaissance plane, unless you got something better to replace it. Mm-hmm. So I suspect there is indeed an Aurora, but I don't have a clearance. I don't have access to the data. Right. So we can speculate.
Well, my follow-up question to that is, how many of UFO cases are actually man-made vehicles test run, in your opinion? Would it be less than 20%?
Yeah. Let's face it, most UFO sightings can be explained as something relatively conventional, perhaps seen under unconventional circumstances.
Right.
And so if you look at big, large-scale scientific studies, I always talk about Blue Book Special Report 14. Yeah. 21.5% of 3,201 cases could not be explained completely separate from the 9.3% for which there was insufficient information. Now, the rest, say the other 70%, are all kinds of things, and some of them might very well be aircraft, meteors, Venus. There's a whole long list of things. So, however, the CIA, in its infinite wisdom, years ago published a paper in which they tried to say that, the Air Force was so glad when people were reporting supposed UFOs because what they were really seeing was the U-2 and the SR-71. The only trouble is, A, there was no increase in sightings when those two started flying, and B, anybody who looks at the characteristics of the U-2 and the SR-71, they don't make right-angle turns. That's right. Turning radius maybe half a mile, They don't land out in the middle of nowhere and take off from there without any assistance. They don't fly silently. They don't hover. No way in the world you're going to make a mistake. Now, there probably were some reports of, say, airline pilots who saw a craft at 80,000 feet with the airliner at 40,000, who were saying, "Whoa, we don't have anything to fly that high," because they didn't know about these vehicles. But they certainly didn't match these important characteristics of flying saucers: the maneuverability, the silence, the hovering, etc. So the CIA, I hate to say this. No, I don't. The CIA was lying. It's as simple as that. And, I think most people now have gotten accustomed to the notion that sometimes governments lie. Yeah. Now, that was a hard notion to swallow back right after World War II. But after Watergate, that's why I talk about a cosmic Watergate. There are lies being put out in front of the public. And I have a whole article on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, about government UFO lies. It's a big article because there are a lot of UFO lies by the government. Mm-hmm. So once people get around the fact that you hope to trust your government and you find you can't, it makes it a lot easier to recognize that, there they go again, lying again.
Worldwide, there's, seems to be a little bit more open platform for UFO discussion, and the British files, they're releasing them by the buckets now, it seems. Yeah. Do you feel that
18 files of 5,000 pages this past few
Yes. Is that aiding ufology, or is it sort of bringing it down a notch?
It's both, for this reason. One, it surprises people that there's so much information. Yeah. Two, people think wrongly that the Ministry of Defense in England or the people in France or in Chile or Peru or Denmark, Spain, they've released a lot of files. They think that it's everything. And what you find, however, is that you don't see any top secret stuff.
Right.
In the United States, there's 12,000 UFO sightings available, the Blue Book files. Some are quite interesting, as a matter of fact. But we know that that wasn't the hot stuff because a memo turned up from General Carroll Bolander, an Air Force general. He worked on the Lunar Excursion module, and when he finished that in 1969, after we landed there, he was asked, what should we do about Project Blue Book? The University of Colorado people said we ought to cancel it because it isn't doing much for intelligence or technology or whatever. So he had no previous connection with it, and he did a study, and he published a memo in October of 1969, which resulted in the closure of Project Blue Book. But buried in this memo is this statement. He said, moreover, reports of UFOs which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP, Joint Army-Navy Air Force Publication 146, or Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system.
Right.
An incredible statement, since whenever you talk to the government about UFOs, we had Project Blue Book, that's all there was, there isn't any more, it's over, etc. And to reiterate, 2 paragraphs later, he says, look, if Project Blue Book is closed, the public won't have a government place to report UFO sightings to. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be made, investigated using the techniques, the regulations established for that purpose. So the good stuff didn't go to Project Blue Book. And there is no reason at all, from my contacts with English researchers and others, to say that what's being released over there is the good stuff, the top secret material that could affect national security. So it's a downside because some of the media have acted, they'll use the term top secret, but it turns out it isn't top secret material.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, it kind of leads you to hope, though, that eventually, there will be disclosure. In your opinion, do you think there ever will be disclosure?
Well, if we get a Woodward and Bernstein of the UFO world, sure.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, it's funny that you mentioned that, because on Monday night I'll be on Coast to Coast Radio with Don Schmidt, Bryce Zabel, and Donnie Most, talking about a new movie, Magic Men, M-A-J-I-C.
Yeah.
And it'll be the life stories, they optioned these, of Don Schmidt and myself. Mm-hmm. And it'll be sort of a combination of all the President's Men and JFK, checking off the stuff that hasn't been released, and our quest for truth, and the ups and downs of trying to get at truth when the government doesn't want you to. And sometimes you get lucky and get a discovery, sometimes you don't. And dealing with those lies that I mentioned. But that could be a great movie. I keep opting for, how about Richard Dreyfuss playing me?
Yeah. Did you have any input or creative control in making that? Or
it hasn't been made yet.
Not yet.
And yeah, they optioned my book, Top Secret Magic. They optioned Don's book, Witness to Roswell, and the right to use our life stories and all this stuff. And it's hard to say it's non-fiction, because I think every movie has some fiction in it.
Right.
For dramatic content and all that sort of thing. But it will be staying close to the truth. Bryce Zabel is the guy who put together Dark Skies.
Yes. And
he did some work on other stuff, working with Steve Spielberg. So he's been concerned about the truth for a long time. I've known him for roughly 15 years. So it'll be interesting to see what we hear on the radio. But we're always looking for people who have finally decided, I might as well tell what I know. Retired General Thomas Jefferson DuBose was the Chief of Staff to General Roger Ramey, head of the 8th Air Force in 1947. And I thought he might be alive. I managed to find him, and he told me his story. I met with him twice. And one of the last things he said to me was, Stan, I like what you're doing. If I remember anything more, I'll tell you. What can they do to me now? He was 87 at the time. So if there are people out there listening to us now who just happen to have a piece of wreckage in the drawer and have been concerned about the government will come after their family and so forth, I'd like to hear from them. My website, www.stantonfriedman.com, tells you how to reach me, email address, phone number. I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, and I was not chased out by the FBI. That was a rumor. I don't know how it got started. But I had a number of people asking me that. What are you doing back there, Stan? I was living in at that time, Northern California.
Yes.
And I have to tell them, look, I'm here because my wife is from New Brunswick. And she's one of 9 siblings, and 6 of them live here, and her parents were here, and we had no family in California. Made family for my kids.
That's right.
I was not chased out. I'm a dual citizen. I can complain about both governments perfectly legally, you understand.
Well, which one is doing a worse job with handling UFOs, would you say, Canada or the United States?
Probably the United States at the moment anyway. But who knows? That might change. It might be a big adventure coming up. I don't know. If we get more people speaking out. There is the former Minister of Defense of Canada,
yes,
a man named Paul Hellyer.
That's right.
He's got a book, There's Light at the End of the Tunnel, and he stands up foursquare for flying saucer reality. So nobody that high level has done that in the United States, really, I don't think. But maybe a trend is starting. Anybody listening, we'd like to hear from you, and I don't use witness names without permission.
That's right, and I also believe, I think it's Colorado has a UFO referendum, part of their election.
Yes, Jeff Peckman has managed to get it on the ballot about setting up a committee to deal with the question of alien visitations, and managed to get enough signatures to get it on the ballot. Now, I have no idea whether it'll pass or not, but can't hurt. Get people talking. He's a pretty sharp guy, too. I just saw him 2 weeks ago in Denver, so, we need more
big
people
event
with guts.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just that we need more people with courage enough to stand up for what's right.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And you would think with Roswell anniversary just happening recently, is that sort of fading away, or is there still...
Oh, no. There were, I've been to most of, they have an annual festival at the International UFO Museum and Research Center, and it was in the first week of July this year, it usually is, and there were over 7,500 people that came through the museum. And remember, if you're in Roswell, it's because you want to be there. It's 200 miles from Albuquerque, Amarillo, El Paso. It's not on the way to anywhere, let's stop by as long as we're here kind of thing. It isn't like that. Now, there isn't a lot of traffic, so, it's not that bad a drive, but, no, it's still has its flavor. I mean, sure, at the 50th anniversary, there were over 300 newsmen there, would you believe? So, we didn't have 300 newsmen.
No, I meant, is the shock value sort of, dying off of the possibility that there may be, even if there's, skin samples of alien beings and a crashed UFO in a hangar somewhere. Are people still terrified about this issue, of an
I don't
invasion?
think so.
No.
I think you get, your Gaussian curve, your bell-shaped curve. You've got extremists at both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
There are people who are scared. There are some people who say, hey, the Bible doesn't say anything about flying saucers, must not be real. I always refer them to the fine book, The Bible and Flying Saucers, by Dr. Barry Downing, who has a degree in physics and a doctorate in divinity. Divine physics is his beat, and he goes through the Old and New Testament and does a splendid job. So you have extremists at the other end who say everything, all our technology is directly obtained from Roswell. I don't believe that either. So someplace in the middle is the healthy ground that, yes, at least one saucer crashed there, another one out in the plains of San Augustine. A few months later, one in Aztec. There'll be a new book out, Crash at Aztec, by Scott Ramsey and Suzanne Ramsey. And boy, have they done a bang-up job on what happened. Aztec's in the northwest corner of the state of New Mexico. And they've collected an enormous amount of data. This was March 1948. And I'm going to be writing the forward for the book, but I just got another chapter today, and it's really good material. I spent a ton of money. One of the things that you need is money to do research. No matter how you slice it, you got to find people, you got to talk to them, you got to meet with them. And if you live on the East Coast, as they do, and I certainly do, I'm an hour ahead of you guys on the East Coast. So, it costs money. My phone bill when I was first researching Roswell, and Bill Moore and we were each spending hundreds of dollars a month trying to find people. That was before the Internet. I know it's hard for some people to think that there was a time before the Internet.
Way back when,
but there was, way back when. And finding people none of this www.411.com, which is great. I use it all the time, but you couldn't do it back then. There was no such system.
Well, I wanted to ask you, too, is there any other alleged crashes around the world that may not be as well known that you've been asked to look into that you could tell the public?
Well, there is one in Varginha, Brazil,
yep,
which is intriguing. There's another one in, Dolnogorsk, I guess it was, Russia.
Yep.
There are stories about other ones, but and as a matter of fact, Kevin Randall gave a paper at the MUFON conference. Dr. Randall talked about Leonard Stringfield, who claims there were 60 different crashes. Now, Len's major background was in public relations, and I think, I hate to say it, but sometimes he just believed stories because they sounded good. And that's not the same as having evidence to support them. So I would say there probably weren't 60 crashes. But one's plenty, and 5 wouldn't surprise me at all. And, one of the myths in the whole UFO scene is that, governments can't keep secrets. Says Shostak has said, hey, this is the same government that ran FEMA after Katrina, and what a lousy job they did. And
that's right.
On another occasion he said, hey, they run the post office too. Ha ha. Well, let's not talk about the post office or FEMA. Let's talk about the NSA, the CIA, the DIA, the NRO. These are multi-billion-dollar black budgets every year. And, as an example, the stealth aircraft developed by Lockheed cost $10 billion and was done in 10 years in secret. In secret. Can't keep secrets? Of course they can keep secrets. And I say that having worked under security for 14 years.
Sure.
So, and I've been to 20 archives. And you want classified documents or documents that are still classified that were developed 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. There's loads of them out there. I mean, there's the Eisenhower Library. He went out of office in 1961. They've got hundreds of thousands of pages of classified material still.
Right.
And it's, 50 years ago.
Right.
So, yes, governments can keep secrets. Don't kid yourself. You are kidding yourself if you think they can.
That's a great point. And, it creates imagination for many, too. And some people just don't want to see beyond that, I guess. But is there any word of possible next generation space travel? Because you mentioned in the beginning of the show that you worked on nuclear aircraft.
And nuclear rockets, too.
And nuclear rockets. Are we implementing any of these systems into, even commercial airlines, space travel?
Not into commercial ones, I would say. The problem with these systems is they're great for going away, far away, to the stars, let's say, or to the outer planets. They're expensive, real expensive. Now, when we want to spend the money, we do. The nuclear navy is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Now, the battleship guys were totally against Admiral Rickover's nuclear navy. What do you want to build a submarine for? Build a battleship. That's more important. Well, Rickover persisted. We now have submarines that can go around the world underwater without refueling, which is pretty neat. We have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, which, believe it or not, can operate for 18 years without refueling.
Wow.
Now, they're not cheap to build. They're relatively cheap to operate. You don't use much. Think of how many tankers full of oil you'd need in the absence of that. And so fission nuclear rockets would be good for upper stages if you want to go to Mars. Fusion rockets, I worked on them in the early 60s, and it's something that is bound to attract the attention of aliens. That we Earthlings, this primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. I mean, World War II, we only killed 50 million Earthlings, we Earthlings did. We destroyed 1,700 cities. We figured out how the stars produced their energy back in 1938, theoretically. We put it to practice in 1952. We exploded our first fusion nuclear bomb, H-bomb, the equivalent energy of exploding 10 million tons of TNT. A big bomb during World War II was a 10-ton blockbuster. We're talking 10 million tons. And the Russians exploded one that was 57 million tons of TNT equivalent. Now, if you were an alien and you looked at this planet and what goes on here, wouldn't you be concerned?
Absolutely.
You're not going to sit back and say, let the primitives come attack us. We don't worry about them. What's an H-bomb between friends, you know? But the kicker is the same energy, the same source of energy, fusion, gives you 10 million times as much energy per particle you kick out the back end of a rocket as you can get in a chemical rocket. 10 million times. So we've made that big jump up without having the sociological advancement you may have noticed. There's still plenty of wars going on.
That's right.
So the times have changed, but those are not going to be cheap. I mean, look, the laser's only 50 years old, and we've already used it to knock down unmanned aerial vehicles. Mm-hmm. What do we do with stuff? We kill. That's
Unfortunately, it's true.
Yeah,
well, you know, and maybe one day there'll be a light switch turned on, and we'll sort of step away from that. But the reason why I ask you that is recently there's been some strange activity with the Norway spiral. There was one in Australia, China a few years ago, and right away they were, you know, written off as rockets. As a rocket expert, as yourself, were they rockets, or was there something else that is sort of scaring the bejesus out of people?
Well, I think the Russians at first were a little reluctant, and the one in Norway, it was not the first failure of that particular rocket. If it goes up, and then a leak happens in the wrong place, it rotates around and creates some very strange patterns in the sky. And so I think that probably was a rocket, a conventional chemical rocket that went astray, much to their embarrassment. Is that the right word? I don't like to admit that. Nobody likes to say, whoops, didn't work, sorry. You know, because young people may not realize, the whole point of going to the moon was a political point.
Yes.
Russians got the first satellite, they got the first animal, they got the first man, they got the first flight around the moon. The United States was looking totally second-rate. And Kennedy said, you know, let's get a man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade. Mm-hmm. And we did it. But there was a while there where the rest of the world was thinking, boy, these Americans don't know how to do anything. Our first satellites exploded on the pad. It was great embarrassment. It made us look second-rate.
That's a great segue, too, because there are a lot of people out there that, including John Lear, who believe there's bases on the moon. Do you feel that that's a possibility?
Well, when you say a possibility, you know, there could be an earthquake here in Fredericton tomorrow. It's a possibility.
Yes. Possibility.
Is it very likely? No. You know, so, possibility, yes. Mm-hmm. It's a major undertaking to get stuff to the moon, unless you can hitchhike on an alien craft.
Yes.
You know, stick your thumb out and, okay, guys, what do you need? Yeah, we can take you up there. It's not too far out of our way. We're going off to Zeta Reticuli. Anyway, but we'll drop you off on the way. But as long as we're stuck with chemical rockets, and I certainly see no indication that we built big nuclear rockets. And when I say big, Los Alamos built the Phoebus 2B nuclear rocket reactor propulsion system. Mm-hmm. Tested it about 1969. It was less than 7 feet in diameter, the reactor. The power level was 4,400 megawatts. That's, as a comparison, twice the power of Grand Coulee Dam, which is just a mite larger, you might have noticed. So we've done some great things, but I was at a meeting where they couldn't decide what they wanted to do with the darn nuclear rocket. And if you don't have leadership, the program gets canceled, which it did.
I wonder if that's the motivation behind that rocket they so-called tested on the moon. You know, they just didn't know what to do with it and wanted to see what it would do and just fired it.
Well, no, they did have a goal. It had been suggested, strange as it might sound, there was water on the moon.
Yeah.
But everybody knew the moon was dry. There's no water up there, no lakes, no beaches, no nothing. Well, you know, stuff coming in from outside might have made water. Some of the rocks up there might have water in them. How can we find out? And somebody had the brilliant idea that if you fired a rocket down into the moon and had a good, I'll call it a spy satellite with it, a means of observing it pretty closely,
yes,
we can find out whether there's water, especially in the dark areas near the pole where the sun never shines. So you could have frozen water, in other words, because it gets pretty darn cold there when you're totally out of the sun and there's no atmosphere. So it was a reasonable experiment. Now, did it cost a lot of money? No. But it did show that there was water on the moon. And now we have a pretty good idea there's water on Mars, quite a bit of it. And the moon has something else, helium-3, light helium, and you put that with heavy hydrogen, and boy, you can get a wonderful fusion reaction, take you to the
very
stars.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
That's where we're going in the future.
What about the possibility of time travel with fusion? Is there any connection?
Not that I know of. Let me put it this way. There's a lot of science fiction written about time travel.
Yes.
There's some scientists claiming that they're talking not science fiction. I'll wait and see. In my gray basket again. I can't say that it's impossible. And, you know, you got these old arguments. If you go back and you kill your father,
yes.
Are you born?
The paradox.
Yeah, there are a lot of these paradoxes, and I don't know how to resolve them. I'm not a theoretical astrophysicist, so I let those guys worry about it. I don't even care about string theory. I mean, you're only talking 11 dimensions. 4 is enough for me to worry about.
I know. Sometimes one dimension's enough, you know. And how about one of the cases that you sort of looked into, the Flatwoods monster? Has there been any recent updates to that case?
Well, there is the book Shoot Them Down by Frank Ficino, who spent more than 15 years working on Flatwoods. I wrote the foreword for the book. And he's done, now don't mention that Monsters television program, because it was monstrous, frankly. But yeah, Flatwoods is a very good case. I've talked to the major witnesses. One of them is dead. But a very good case in Flatwoods, West Virginia in 1952, September 12th. And it's one of many cases that are deserving of more attention, but to get somebody to devote as much time and effort and money as Frank did, I don't know. Those are the people that are hard to find. So, yeah, I like that case. The book is Shoot Them Down. It's listed on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com. I autograph it because I wrote the foreword, and so there's a place for my name and all that stuff. But very good case.
And how about for yourself, sir? What's your upcoming engagements and projects that you're working on?
Well, I'm going to, I hope this Magic Men movie comes through, but I'll be speaking in Exeter, New Hampshire on the 4th of September. I'll be in Angel Fire, New Mexico, the 9th through the 12th of September. I'll be in Burlington, Wisconsin. These are all listed on the website. In Burlington, Wisconsin, Halloween weekend, they have an annual conference. I'll be at the ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment, in Virginia Beach in mid-November. And really looking forward, there's going to be it used to be Laughlin Congress.
Yes.
It'll be in now it's switching over to the Phoenix area in February. And what I'm really looking forward to, there's going to be, it looks like, a conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, about innovation. And they invited me to present there about extraterrestrial life. I've never been to Riyadh, and it's certainly going to be warmer than it is here in Fredericton in February.
For sure.
Looking forward to it.
And on a closing note, because this has been an absolute joy of an hour, is there any opinion of yours, any entity out there that is on the right track? I know there's countless groups and organizations that are trying to get to the truth. Is there a particular favorite of yours?
Well, actually, the Mutual UFO Network they've had 41 annual symposia. They publish proceedings each year. They have papers presented by professional people like myself. There were 500 in attendance in Denver 2 weeks ago, I guess it was 3 weeks ago. There are a whole bunch of splinter groups all over the place. But I'll stick with MUFON. Others have come and gone, but they're still at it. They got new management now, and I'm an enthusiast. They did a great job in Denver. Their address is on my website, incidentally.
Absolutely, and I just want to say, sir, that, this is still the highlight of my journalistic career, and I can't thank you enough for coming on again.
Well, you're very welcome. And we'll do it again when something new and great, when Magic Men comes out. How's that?
Absolutely. Well, you have yourself a great night, and I really appreciate the late hours that you stayed up, sir, and you have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Take care. What a fantastic hour and an amazing guest, absolute legend in the field, and I still can't believe that I get the opportunity to speak to these people. And please join me for my next show. It'll be with Barry John from England, and he's a great psychic, and he's been on before. So have yourself a great night, everyone. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side.